Hey, we are here at the Signature Leadership Show podcast. This is a show where we watch world-class leaders uncover their authentic self. And we are with our guest today, a sales leader, a keynote speaker, a author, and so much more, John Livesay. Hey, John.
Hey, Jamie. Thanks for having me.
A few other things about John is he's referred to as the pitch whisperer, is a sales keynote speaker where he shows company sales teams how to turn mundane case studies into compelling case stories. Formerly, he had an award-winning career at Condé Nast, and his Tedx Talk, Be the Lifeguard of Your Own Life, has over 1 million views. So John, what I'd love to do is jump right in here, is I'm going to ask you what a problem, a challenge, or an opportunity that's on your mind right now. And then we're going to go through a process where we look to see how we can close the gap to move you closer to that. Now, you're used to being a leader in terms of helping people tell better stories to win sales.
Yes.
So this session is going to look at your story in a
Yes.
little depth in a very quick time frame.
Wonderful. I would say one of the big challenges I have as an entrepreneur and a speaker is trusting the process. That, for example, I've had a really great first quarter this year, lots of bookings, but there's not a lot that's booked the next 2 quarters. And so it's very challenging for me to not get anxious about that. And as opposed to just trusting the process, that the relationships I've built with speaking bureaus, the content I put out has generated, leads from SEO, search engine, people find me on Google, or referrals, or all the other things I do and have done that have worked will continue to work as much as I would like them to. In other words, accepting what is and trusting the process. Right now, you don't know where the next 6 talks are coming from. And so that can create some anxiety, which is, I know, the antithesis of being free and open to letting it come in. And then ironically, I had one request, are you available next month? And then somebody else saying, are you available in January of next year already? So I thought, how funny. Somebody's planning that far out and somebody else is just last minute in the next 30 days. So I know I'm not alone in that, especially going from a corporate job where you've got a steady paycheck to working for yourself and it's a little bit of feast or famine, and people are like, I'm not interested in all the conversations around, we need to fix your funnel and we need to fix this. I know I've done all those things that, like I said, relationships are built with bureaus. I'm top of mind. I'm putting content out. The SEO is working. So it's not that. It's more of a mental thing of just accepting there's an ebb and flow to things. Is that useful?
Yes. So accepting the process, and I can relate to that as well in terms of that uncertainty that sometimes persists. Is there a better focus for you to pursue instead of the accepting the process? Is there a more active, more forward-looking mindset than just accepting that this is the way things are?
Well, I recently created a new talk so that I am expanding my audience so that I'm not just dependent on sales audiences to hire me as a speaker. One of the things I'm actively doing is I created a whole new talk called Tell Stories, Recruit Top Talent. And I recently spoke at a SHRM, which is the Society of Human Resource Management organization. And so I'm actively promoting myself as more than just a sales keynote speaker, but in fact, the ability to use storytelling to recruit top talent. So I'm not just dependent on sales audiences hiring me.
Okay, excellent. And I think, is that an important exception for you to remember, that you still are top of mind with organizations who have hired you? It just might be a seasonal component.
Yes.
Because I'm seeing that as well. The spring and the fall, there's more action than there has been in the past few months. So I only bring that up. I don't always bring those relatable pieces up, but you're not alone. I feel the same in terms of what's going on down the pipeline, but now it's feels a certain amount of uncertainty. What I'd love to do is jump right in and look at your handwriting.
Okay.
So I asked you to write a few lines beforehand, and I want to see if we can apply what I see in about 10 to 20 seconds in your handwriting in dealing with accepting the process, dealing with the uncertainty as speakers, as consultants, of when that work will come, even when there's been success in the past that we've experienced, and you've experienced a lot of success. I think we have also mutual ties with agencies who represent us, and you're represented by some of the top agencies in the world. So what I'm going to ask you to do is, if you could please hold up the writing that I asked you to do just before we came on, and I am going to look at a copy here, so just so the audience sees, I asked John to do this just before we came on. And the first thing that I'm seeing in your handwriting is there is a lot of empathy. So if you hold it up, and you can look at this, John, because we haven't discussed this beforehand, the entire line angle of your writing is slightly to the right. So the strokes look consistently in this direction. Empathy, when I use it as a definition, is caring what other people care about. It's being able to relate and respond to people, not just in terms of knowing or understanding on an intellectual level, but also understanding them emotionally. And with you, there's high EQ. There is a line that is consistently to the right. It's hard to see this unless you've done this thousands of times like I have. You can trust me on this, but every single angle shows EQ. Empathy is a critical component, as you would know, of emotional intelligence. And emotional intelligence is about, on a social level, understanding people socially. On an emotional level, it's empathizing with people or caring what they care about. It's emotional regulation, as to feel deeply about how other people are experiencing it, but you don't go so far as to actually completely, although I think sometimes you might, as I do with this trait too, but I think you have a good balance of understanding people, but pulling back just enough to know that if that boundary is crossed, you try not to absorb too much, especially if it's a negative emotion. So it's deep EQ, it's the ability to empathize with others. And what I'm seeing there is that empathy does extend to other people. But what I'm also seeing is, now this is a question you might not have ever been asked before. I'm seeing it on the T-bars. When you write your lowercase t's, are you crossing them from the left to the right, or are you reversing them to the right to the left? Are they going backwards, or are they forward when you're doing them?
Left to right.
Left to right, okay. But here's what I'm seeing, though, with some of the T-bars. The last line where it says, "to the darn zoo," that is a low T-bar. Now, some of the most famous people in history actually had their T-bars to the middle or low, which surprises me sometimes, because what that means is there's 18 different personality traits that can show up in the T-bar, is that there are times, and please tell me what you're hearing with this, whether I'm right or off a bit, that you will help other people see themselves, see them in the best light, but sometimes you might underestimate your own power in achieving certain goals. And so you're hearing that. So I'm seeing that in that last line in particular. It's not in every line, right? So in the third line, it's quite high, if you notice. So it doesn't mean in every situation. I'm looking here for the gap between whatever that thought is or that mindset, and how in a very short amount of time to see if we can change, even an expert at your level, build the self-awareness of what that might be and how to change it or adjust it if you think there is a reason to. So in that last line, I would question and say, what goal, and it might be this goal about accepting the process, maybe a little too passively, could you leave this call in a few minutes from now and figure out a way to more actively pursue that goal of having, in this case, more consistency in the pipeline? Because that low T-bar shows me, based as a handwriting expert, that you're saying that you believe in yourself fully right now in terms of what you've done before, that you've earned the right to have that. But I've heard recently, I don't even know if I fully believe this, but it's worth provoking a thought, because it made me a little defensive, but I think there's some truth to it, which is we don't always get what we want in the moment. We get with how we're feeling, or where we are now, where we think we are now. So it's not, maybe not giving yourself the credit that your resume, your books, your online courses. I know you, I'm a fan of yours, and we've never met in person. We're online friends.
Right.
Is how other people see you.
Yeah.
What would it take for you? And the question is, what would it take for you to embody the empathy for yourself that you give to others?
That's such a powerful question. Embody the empathy to myself that I give others. I think it goes way back to childhood. And there was a book that really resonated with me called The Best Little Boy in the World.
Yeah.
Where, as someone struggling in my youth to be openly gay and still feel lovable, that was a big, big issue. So I overcompensated. I had to be the best son, the best student, the best brother, the best employee, just to feel okay enough, that compensating for that. And I think some of that is still there. Who I am isn't enough sometimes unless I'm really overachieving or over delivering. And so that's where I would say I could maybe cut myself some slack and just have a little empathy going, no, at this point in your life, you are enough, and you don't have to keep constantly trying to prove yourself to other people or even to yourself that you're enough. That's the advice I would give somebody else. And so it's funny to give it to myself.
Yeah. And I think you read my mind on that point, because it was, what advice would you give a close friend when it comes to not being so hard on yourself and giving yourself a break? Because I know your circle and some of our circles cross over. You're in the circle of other successful speakers and writers and thought leaders. So is that the advice you would give someone who was going through this similar situation? Yeah.
Big time. It's, why don't you just start from a premise that you're enough, as opposed to having to achieve something to feel enough? When I've had moments of that, it's so freeing, right? The vulnerability, the taking, and I teach this, don't let go of being a perfectionist. And all that comes from a place of not feeling enough. I got to be, and the minute I'm not perfect, then everything is, worthless, as opposed to, well, that was just a bump in the road, whatever. So getting a little more comfortable with, I'm making progress, I'm better than I was yesterday or last month or whatever, and letting go of that need for everything to always be perfect, including myself, then I can go out there and, have even more personal stories of how I've struggled with that.
Absolutely. So on that point about making progress, about feeling enough, about seeing yourself as enough, the last question I want to leave you with is, if we were back together 1 year from now, celebrating your progress in your work, and it's evolved and grown beyond what you ever could have imagined was possible, what are all the things we are celebrating?
Oh, gosh. I'm traveling internationally a lot more than I am now, and in tagging on that personal a day or two to the business trip. And you were kind enough to make a recommendation in Ottawa of something, a spa to go to. So I know what that feels like and how rejuvenating that is, to go on a business trip but have some fun and personal time either before or afterwards. To me, that's a joyful life, a well-lived.
Amazing. What's one action you could take when we get off in about 2 or 3 minutes toward making that happen?
Ironically, it's not I need to make 5 more phone calls a day kind of thing or send more emails out. It's more taking my own advice I give other people about being more empathetic to myself. And also, we think we want to give X number of talks a year, but maybe that would be physically exhausting. So it's like, just trust that whatever opportunities are coming along and the ones that I'm a fit for, that's the right pace, as opposed to in my internal head going, oh, I need to do this in order to feel enough or successful or whatever. Try to turn some of that internal judgment down volume wise.
Yeah. And this is so helpful. If a speaker listens to this, then these are the kind of vulnerabilities that I don't know if we as speakers talk about openly so much. Maybe behind closed doors, but there is a real power in, I feel, hearing how someone you respect does not have a perfect career in terms of what they're looking for. To know that you're not alone, because this has helped me
Oh, I'm glad.
process the last few months as well. So that I appreciate in not only you making the time, but also being open and vulnerable when it comes to sharing that. What did you appreciate about this 18 minutes?
Well, first, you. I just am such a fan of you as a person and as a dad and a husband, and your creativity and your energy is always just a joy to be around, virtually, and I can imagine in person for the audience who gets to hear you. Also, the biggest thing that I appreciate is the number one thing that comes out of my handwriting is empathy, because I've been working on that and I teach that. And so to me, that's probably one of the highest compliments I can ever give or get, is that somebody feels safe enough to be themselves around me and vice versa. So the fact that that came out first, as opposed to, oh, you're very ambitious, or you're a good communicator, or the 101 things you could have said, that would be what I would want to be known for, is like a male Brene Brown, which is what somebody actually said to me once. And I was like, oh, I'll take that. Thank you. In terms of vulnerability and empathy, especially as it relates to speaking to a lot of tech engineers who are not known for that, and getting them to tap into that side of their personality, that really lights me up, because I think you don't have to be a tech or left brain engineer to have trouble being empathetic to other people. But like you just reminded me, it has to start with being empathetic to ourselves, because we can't give out what we don't give ourselves.
Thank you. And that's a perfect place to stop. So that is the Signature Leadership Podcast. I'm Jamie Mason Cohen, uncovering the authentic leadership traits of the world's most fascinating leaders.